Good afternoon, everybody. This is Dr. Michael Kaye from the Center for Functional Health, and I am so happy and honored to have with me today Jenna Richardson from Princeton Integrative Health. I've been looking forward to our talk for quite some time. I know we spoke about a month ago or so when we set this up. I'm so glad you're able to come on. Now more than ever, what you're going to deliver today is going to help us all because we are just overwhelmed. So if you can start, please share us your background and then really what is a transformational coach? Because now more than ever, we need to be transformed.
Yeah, sure. Thanks for having me, Michael. So my background is kind of interesting. So obviously I'm working now in more of a health-related profession. I'm a transformational health and life coach and I'm co-owner of Princeton Integrative Health here in Lawrenceville, New Jersey, just south of Princeton, New Jersey. But I have about 15 years of experience in international business and management consulting. So I actually started out down a path of getting into the medical field. I went to Cornell University for pre-med and recognized within the first semester that I couldn't stand the sight of blood, the smell of formaldehyde, and I got a D- in Chem 101. And I was like, yeah, probably not going to med school. So here I am. But what's interesting is that I spent a majority of my career working with companies on their overall health and wellness. So how they can increase and improve productivity, efficiency, effectiveness. And really my passion underlying all of that was how to apply that to health and well-being. So when I got pregnant with my son about 7 years ago, I started to do a lot of soul searching, recognizing that motherhood was going to change me extrinsically, but didn't realize how much it was going to change me intrinsically. So I went back to school. I studied at the Institute for Integrative Nutrition and then went on to study functional diagnostic nutrition, which dived a lot more into kind of the biology and physiology behind how the body works and how we create optimal health and well-being. And along that path really went through my own transformation and then ultimately have, kind of, again, been through like my own health and personal transformation, obviously professional transformation. And then also have worked obviously very closely with like my family and friends and community and working on that, and have done other extensive training in like high performance coaching, life coaching, and really have brought all of those things together, recognizing that health is not just the absence of disease, but it's about how we create overarching fulfillment in our life. So components of health are not just, the food that we put into our body, but our kind of spiritual beliefs, our relationships, how we're moving our bodies, if we have purpose and passion in our lives. So all of these things that ultimately create health and happiness and fulfillment. So that's what transformational coaching is. There's a big component of mindset and of transformation. And again, it's not just the absence of disease, but it's how we live our best life.
So when we hear the word coach, though, often we relate coach with like sports, right? So,
sure.
This isn't going to be somebody yelling at us, right? So,
I am from New York, so.
And I'm originally from Philly, so it can be really interesting how we would yell at somebody. So when you see a client, how do you serve them? What do you say? What do you do? I mean, it's not like you can scream, one more repetition, right?
Right.
So how do you share with them that they need to move forward?
Yeah. So early in this process, I came up with an approach which I call the 4 E's. So it's really about engagement, education, empowerment, and then encouragement. So in terms of creating change in our life, in terms of creating transformation in our life, we need to be at a point where we're ready to do that. But it's also super scary. There's a lot of behavioral change that has to take place because ultimately that's really what drives this. And that can be a big jumping off point for people. So I think it's really important to meet them where they're at, to hold space for them, to be there to support in a very non-judgmental way, and to coach through the fact that small changes can make a really big difference for many people. So, some people that I work with are all in and ready to go. And like, it doesn't really take too much to get them motivated and get them moving in the right direction. Other people need a little bit more hand holding and support through that process. So it's about understanding and getting to know that individual in a pretty intimate way. There's a very strong relationship, a very strong partnership through this process of co-creating health and well-being. And so it's important that we're comfortable with one another and comfortable with the place that person is in. It's kind of a continuum. Gotcha.
So when you're working with an individual, if they're not doing what you're asking them to do, you keep telling them over and over again, think about this, or you invite them to consider their options in different ways, but they're just not moving forward, right? I mean, do you ever fire a client? I mean, because it's kind of like, we have those clients and patients. I mean, I tell patients all the time, here's the exercise you need to do. Here's the exercise you need to do. Here's the video for the exercise you need. Here's the handout you need. So as a coach, how do you help that person who is just, they're their worst enemy, right? They won't move forward.
Yeah. So I'm not a psychologist by any means, but obviously there's an aspect of kind of getting inside their brain and inside their mind in some cases. To answer your question, I have broken up with clients in the past. There are some that just haven't been able to get past their limiting beliefs, but ultimately what I try to do before we get to that point is to have a dialogue around what those things are. There are a lot of deeply rooted beliefs that have sprung up over the course of people's lives and even into their very early childhood, which have, I think, held them back from taking the strides that they need to take to express themselves and ultimately live in an optimal way. And it's really kind of trying to tap into what those things are, talking through those things and helping them to recognize that they are worthy, that they should be loving themselves, that they should be investing in themselves. One of the things that I've been thinking a lot about in the last several months is this concept of self-love. So I'm planning to write a book in the not too distant future, which I'm hoping to call Love Yourself Well. Wonderful. Because ultimately that's really where it starts. It starts by believing that you're worthy, right? And loving yourself and believing that, you're worthy of making the investment in yourself and in your health. So kind of a roundabout way to answer your question, but ultimately we try to tap into those limiting beliefs and what's holding people back. And then worst case scenario, and it's only happened a couple of times, there may be a point where you have to break up with somebody because you can lead a horse to water, but you can't make them drink. So they need to be ready and at a point in their life where they're really ready to take control of their situation and stop any self-sabotage that's occurring.
Excellent. Now you talked about, coaching, obviously them maybe not doing what you are telling them to do or asking them to do. You and I are in a mentorship program together. Do you have a coach yourself? Have you been coached?
I do. I have an amazing coach. So I've had several mentors over the course of, this major transformation that I've taken in the last 7-ish years. And they've just been absolutely instrumental in that process. My most recent coach is a gentleman by the name of Andrew Skopik, who is a high performance coach. So he works with people on overcoming their limiting beliefs. I've learned so much from him about clarity and courage and commitment and really what it takes to kind of get to the next level and break down those barriers. So I speak with him probably on at least a weekly basis. So I think it's so necessary for people to have a coach in their lives, someone they can connect with, learn from, and someone who's willing to kind of push them past what they may believe their limits are.
Gotcha. So, I mean, I know people have more than one coach too. So how does somebody go about in choosing a coach?
It's a great question. Like I said, I grew up in the business world and I was in kind of strategic development for a period of time. And one of the early philosophies that I learned was like leads to trust, trust leads to relationship, and relationship leads to investment. And granted, that's really more of a business foundation, but I think it's the same type of an approach. I think first and foremost, you know, you need to be, as a coach, you need to be someone who's kind of likable and charismatic and not judgmental, and someone who, again, meets that person where they're at. They need to feel comfortable and confident, you know, with you and working with you, because they're putting their trust in you. They're putting their health somewhat in your hands. And they want to make sure that they're making, you know, the best investment of their time, effort, and energy. So I think it's, you know, we'll have like a discovery session before we agree to doing any type of work together. And it's kind of like a date, you know, it's like you date before you get married. You want to get to know that person and feel comfortable and confident that they're the appropriate choice for you before you make that next commitment.
And as an individual and as a business, how do we know when we need a coach or we need a consultant, or maybe we need both? So can you explain briefly the difference between a consultant and a coach?
Sure. So, you know, having come from the consulting world, I think a consultant kind of acts as a trusted advisor where they can provide insight and education and information. But where I always saw consulting fall short was in the implementation piece of things. So what I believe coaching brings to the table, and I have a differentiation as well between coaching and counseling. So, you know, counseling, I think, kind of focuses on what's happened in the past. You know, we can talk about that all day long, but unless you're taking both strategic and tactical actions to take things forward and move past the point at which you are currently at, then you're not really affecting or implementing any form of change. So, you know, counseling, I think, kind of lives in the past. Consulting kind of lives in the present. Here's what we should do. Coaching takes you into the future. So I talk a lot, especially more recently, I know we're going to get into this, but about future-proofing your health. So like, what can we do now? What actions can we take that ultimately will create optimal health in the future, so that should we run into another situation like the one we're in now with the coronavirus, we're well prepared for that.
Well, that is probably the best explanation I have ever heard with respect to coach versus counseling versus consulting. So that was absolutely wonderful. I don't think a lot of people realize how important the coach plays that role in the medical setting, because you also work in the medical setting. And a lot of people would ask, what is a coach doing in the medical setting? And of course, you and I would ask, why isn't there a coach in the medical setting, right?
Right.
It makes perfect sense to us. So can you share how your role is really important in that medical setting?
Yeah. So first and foremost, you know, the medical system is overwhelmed. I think most people will agree that when they visit a conventional, you know, physician-based practice, I kind of call it the revolving door, because you'll go in, you'll sit for about an hour, maybe in the waiting room, and then you might have 5 to 10 minutes with the physician. So physicians and medical professionals, they're overworked, they're overwhelmed, and they just don't, they can tell you what you should be doing, but they don't have the time to actually help you to implement those strategies and those kind of tactical actions to be able to get where you need to go. And that's really where a coach comes into play. So I work alongside a medical doctor, as well as other practitioners, to help with the education, the understanding, the engagement, the encouragement, the support, to help people take tactical action to move their health in the right direction. So, you know, you might go see a doctor and he may say, oh, well, you need to eat a healthier diet. Well, what does that mean? For everyone, that's a little bit different. I believe in bio-individuality, meaning everyone's a unique biochemical machine. So what works for me dietarily may not work for you, and vice versa. So it takes time. It's time to figure out your body. It's time to figure out, you know, the right inputs for your body to kind of get the right energetic outputs. It takes time to kind of peel back that onion. And so it's a coach's responsibility and job in a medical practice like Princeton Integrative Health to really be the person to help work through those things, to kind of handhold, to answer questions, to support, and to really be almost like a case manager, I guess, and the major contact and liaison and friend in some circumstances.
I remember when I went through my coaching certification program, I did 2 of them, and the coach wanted to just, throw me right out the door because it was so hard to switch over and to learn, you know, getting away from where's the pain, what's the problem, and let me fix it.
Yeah.
Right. Here's
Right.
what I need to do. Right. So, I mean, that
Yeah.
was always the problem. And she was like, no, Michael, you're coaching, you're trying to discover more. And that's why I'm probably
Right.
saying, you know what, I'm going to let the coaches do the coaches and I'll stay with the doctoring. So I feel the coach plays such a strong role in the medical setting. And I know a lot of people who I was speaking to, and I hope you can touch base on this today, is I feel stuck. They feel like they can't move forward, whether it's in career, it's in relationships. And I often say, well, instead of looking outside, we have to look inside. And introspection is like the hardest thing to do. So can you share with us your thoughts on what do we do when we feel like we are stuck? We're just paralyzed.
Yeah, I mean, I think the big question, and we're always asking this question in the functional medicine world, is why? What is that limiting belief or that barrier that's holding you back? And then how can we shift that mindset? There are a lot of different ways to do that. It's usually a multi-pronged approach in terms of how you take that step forward. But I think the first thing is understanding and awareness, kind of consciousness around what the actual challenge or issue is. And then, the ability to kind of unravel that to figure out, what needs to be done. How do you need to feel? What do you need to believe in order to take that next step and to move forward? The other thing that I've also found is that change can be really overwhelming for folks. So taking small steps, implementing small actions can really make a major impact. It's, if I tell somebody that they need to move their body more, well, it's a whole lot more challenging for them to think, oh my gosh, I have to go out and walk 5 miles every day. But I had one client where I was like, you know what, just when you leave work, just put your sneakers on. She had every intention of going out after work. She worked on this like beautiful lake and walking around the lake, which was a several mile walk. And so she would never do it. She just like leave her work clothes on, go get in the car and drive home. And I said, this is all I want you to do. Before you walk out of your office, put your sneakers on. Walk to your car or walk and just kind of hang out outside. And if you feel like venturing out around the pond, then do that. And that made just such a big difference for her. It was just the act of putting the sneakers on that really changed her whole mindset around this movement piece of things. So I've seen that happen a lot, where it's just implementing small things can really kind of create a major shift for folks.
So let's talk briefly, before we talk about our current events, let's talk briefly about willpower then. Do you believe that there is willpower, that we can just, put our big pants on, hold our chin up and just muscle through it? Or do you think that willpower is something that's developed? Do you think it's some people have it, some people don't?
I think that's a really interesting and very complex question. I think willpower is a thing, but I think willpower is a result of many other things, again, that have kind of led us to a certain point in our life. So our beliefs about ourself, our self-worth, our self-love in some capacity. And then, knowing what we know now in the functional medicine space, we also know that there are certain types of neurotransmitters and chemical reactions that need to take place in our body to produce things like motivation. So, 80% of your dopamine, which is kind of your motivation chemical, is produced in your gut. And so if your gut isn't healthy and it's not producing the right neurotransmitters to then signal your brain, well, it's a whole lot harder for you to kind of garner up that motivation to actually have willpower to actually create any change. So it's really important to factor in not just the psychological components, but also the physiologic components.
Well, I know there's a discussion of willpower now because a lot of people have been purchasing a tremendous amount of food. So more food than they would normally have in their refrigerator because of what's currently happening. And now the willpower is just not to eat everything because it's there, not to eat everything because you're stressed out, not to eat everything because you want to, give it to the kids so they be quiet for a little bit, right? So Willpower, is an interesting concept to talk about. So this leads us into our current events. COVID-19, the coronavirus. A lot of people are very overwhelmed, and I get it. It makes sense. I'm overwhelmed as well. It's upsetting to what's happening and watching the news. So, one of my goals today is lending some calm to that situation.
Sure.
So it's happening. It's here, whether you're a conspiracy theorist or not, it doesn't matter. It is here. From a coaching perspective, what can you share? How can we get this under control? How do we get our thoughts under control? How do we deal with what is happening?
Yeah. So the first thing, I think it really boils down to perspective. So to your point, why this is happening is kind of irrelevant. The fact of the matter is we're in a situation that we're in, and we can choose how we experience that and how we position that. I saw a meme out there online that said something to the effect that your grandparents were called to war and you're being called to sit on your couch. So like, suck it up, you can do this. And that's kind of stuck with me because I have 2 young kids, and I'm now like a homeschooling mom, and a stay-at-home mom, and I never really signed up for that. But I'm in that position. And so, kind of remembering things like that and keeping things in perspective has been really, really helpful for me. There's been a lot of, I think, fear and anxiety that's being spread out there, whether that's via the major media or social media or, kind of whatever you're tuning into. So I encourage people to try to step away from that as much as they possibly can in order to be able to kind of shift your perspective. So trying to live in the positive space rather than the negative space. Thinking about what you're grateful for. One of the really interesting things, again, for me is that I have a 6-year-old son. And what I found is that we were having some contentious times before this, and going into this whole social distancing aspect of things, I was kind of thinking like, we're going to be together 24/7. What are we going to do? We have kind of similar personalities, so we can tend to butt heads. But what's been really interesting is that we've experienced a significantly greater connection in being together than we had before. So it's interesting for me to kind of evaluate what's driving the contention before versus kind of the connection now. So I think it's being grateful and recognizing, the positive aspects that have come out of this. The more macro level stuff, like the benefit to our environment, that we're not all now like commuting to work and there aren't airplanes flying, through the air, and factories have shut down, and it's kind of like taking a peaceful pause. And so I think a lot of it is about trying to keep those things in perspective as we move through this. Like I said, avoiding the negativity, avoiding the news, turning off the media. They sell fear essentially, and they profit from it. So, this is something that I've told people for years. It's like, shut off the news. I had a patient who, type 2 diabetic, kind of major metabolic syndrome. And he was doing everything right. But what he would do is he would tape the 6 o'clock news on 4 different channels, sit down at night at like 10 p.m. and binge watch the news. And he would wonder why his blood sugar was spiked in the morning, even though he hadn't ventured into the kitchen past like 6 p.m. Like, dude, right. Turn the news off.
Nothing better than a news diet, right? I mean, you can't go wrong, right? If you have to go on a fast, go on a news fast.
Seriously. So yeah, I think it's, gratitude, it's perspective, it's mindfulness, it's recognizing that this is temporary. This is temporary. We're not going to live in, social quarantine forever. There are some things going on that are larger than us. It's kind of letting go of that aspect of things. We don't have control of this situation. It's been challenging for me. I'm a very kind of type A person. So releasing that has been interesting. I encourage people to be mindful, to meditate if they can, pray if you're a spiritual person, and, figure out what works for you.
Now, all that is absolutely wonderful and then some, but we also have to address, and we should address, is the immune system, right? So I know you've put together this program, and the immune system is so important. I've been talking about it. A lot of our colleagues have been talking about it.
Yeah.
So I would love your input on how we can make our immune system a fortress.
Absolutely. Yeah. So I think the benefit of what's happened with this coronavirus outbreak is that it's forcing people to really kind of wake up and pay attention to their health. Some really interesting statistics that I had heard from Italy, actually from another very trusted physician, a DO, about what had happened in Italy is that, the statistics have been somewhat skewed just based upon their population. They're, I think, reporting like a 7.7 mortality rate based upon coronavirus. But the challenge there is that Italy is actually like the second oldest nation in the world, and this affects the older generation. And they also tend to be obese and they're smokers. So there are a lot of kind of cofactors that have affected how that country has been impacted. So I think, it's causing people to kind of wake up and pay attention to their health and specifically their immune system. So what I try to talk to people about is the fact that, our immune system is extremely complex. However, it boils down pretty simplistically. So, you have an innate immune system and you have an adaptive immune system, kind of the two components. The innate is kind of your external fortress, your barrier, your skin, and your digestive tract. So about 80% of your immune system lies actually in your digestive tract, in your gut, kind of the window, if you think about your mouth is the window to the world. That's super important. So keeping, your gastrointestinal lining intact and your gut microbiome very, very strong is important. And your adaptive immune system is kind of the internal soldiers and guards who, if that fortress is broken into, then attack. So, the more important aspect is keeping our kind of physical and chemical barrier strong. So gut health is super important. And that's something that we in the kind of functional medicine space talk about all the time. What I've done as of a couple of days ago is set up a free Facebook group. The group address is facebook.com/groups/PIH immune support. And so what I'm hoping to do there is to help people to optimize their immune health now. And I talk about future-proofing your health because coronavirus is, something that has sprung up for us, but it's not to say that this isn't going to happen again. What happens is, bacteria and viruses, they become resistant, they morph, they evolve. And so, there's something new on the horizon. So really all we can do now is to make sure that our fortress is as strong as it can possibly be. And so the group, is really to kind of help people. Again, it's there's no charge, there's nothing that I'm looking to get out of it, but it's just like, how can we strengthen our immune systems now so that we can reverse any type of potential chronic challenge that we have, but also so that we're prepared for the future.
Excellent. So you'll share the links with me as well. You'll send it in Facebook Messenger, whatever I can get that, because I want to put that back up on this link and share with my people as well.
Yes.
So how does somebody get in touch with you?
I'm sorry, get in touch with me?
How does somebody get in touch with you?
Yep. Yeah, so our website is www.princetonih.com. My direct email address is jenna@princetonih.com. Our offices will be closed as of Monday. We're scaling back just to kind of limited internal office hours. Everything will be done virtually, but we'll have someone here answering the phones and, providing supplements and things like that in the mornings, Monday through Thursday. So if you do call and, you get a voicemail, we'll certainly return your call. The number here is 609-512-1468. And then we're on Facebook. So Princeton Integrative Health is our Facebook page. As I mentioned, I have the free Facebook group. And I love to connect with people, really super passionate about how we build the health of our community. And also, like I said, as a mom of young kids, I think it's really important to start to teach the younger generation how they can take care of themselves to optimize their health.
Absolutely wonderful. So I can't thank you enough for your time today. I really appreciate it. I mean, I learned a lot. I'm sure our listeners will learn a lot as well. And I look forward to seeing you in the future.
Thanks so much, Michael. Stay safe.
You as well.
Bye.